The morning light from the artificial sun filtered through the massive windows of New Geneva Space Station. Keanu Reeves walked slowly through the busy corridors, his hands in his pockets. At 423 years old, he moved with the same calm energy that had made him famous centuries ago. His long black hair, now streaked with silver, fell around his shoulders. The advanced medical technology of 2387 had kept him healthy and strong, but his eyes held the wisdom of 4 centuries. People passed by him without a second glance. He wore simple blue jeans and a plain black shirt. No one would guess that he was Earth's cultural ambassador to the Galactic Council. No one would think that he was one of the most important humans in the galaxy. That was exactly how Keanu liked it. He had finished his morning meetings with the alien diplomats 3 hours early. The talks about trade agreements between Earth and the Centauri system had gone better than expected. Now he had free time, something rare in his busy schedule. He decided to explore the station's luxury district, a place he rarely visited. The luxury district buzzed with activity. Aliens from dozens of worlds browsed expensive shops. Tall, green-skinned Altarians examined rare crystals. Short, furry Betelgeusians argued over the price of exotic spices. Blue-skinned Zentaurians, known for their pride and arrogance, looked down their noses at everything and everyone. Keanu stopped in front of a shop called Temporal Elegance. The store's windows displayed the most beautiful timepieces he had ever seen. Watches that seemed to glow with their own inner light. Clocks that showed not just time, but the movement of planets and stars. One piece in particular caught his attention. The watch sat alone in the center of the main display. It was called the Infinity Weaver according to the small sign next to it. The timepiece was silver and black, with a face that seemed to show different dimensions of time all at once. As Keanu stared at it, the watch face shifted and changed, showing what looked like glimpses of past and future. He pushed open the shop door. A soft chime announced his arrival. The inside of the store was even more impressive than the window display. Hundreds of timepieces lined the walls. Some floated in the air, held by anti-gravity fields. Others were locked in protective energy shields. Behind the main counter stood a Centaurian female. Her blue skin had the slight shimmer that marked her as wealthy. Her purple hair was pulled back in an elaborate style that probably cost more than most people made in a year. She wore expensive robes that marked her high status in Centaurian society. The alien woman looked up as Keanu entered. Her large, violet eyes scanned him from head to toe. She saw his casual clothes, his simple appearance, his human features. Her expression changed from polite interest to barely hidden disdain. "May I help you?" she asked in perfect English, though her tone suggested she would rather not. Keanu smiled his gentle smile. "Yes, thank you. I was interested in the watch in your window. The Infinity Weaver." The Centaurian woman, whose name tag read Zara Villix, raised one perfectly sculpted eyebrow. She glanced toward the window display, then back at Keanu. Her violet eyes narrowed slightly. "The Infinity Weaver," she repeated slowly as if speaking to a child. "That piece is very expensive. It cost 50,000 galactic credits." She paused, letting the enormous sum sink in. 50,000 credits was enough to buy a small starship. It was more money than most beings would see in their entire lives. "Perhaps," Zara continued, her voice dripping with false politeness, "you would be more interested in our budget section?" She gestured toward a small corner of the store where much simpler timepieces sat on plain shelves. Keanu's expression did not change. He nodded slowly, his dark eyes studying the Centaurian woman's face. Something flickered in his gaze, but it was not anger. It was something deeper, more complex. Amusement, perhaps, or maybe disappointment. "I see," he said quietly. At that moment, a human man emerged from the back room. He was young, maybe in his 30s, with short brown hair and friendly eyes. His name tag identified him as Rick Thorne. He carried a box of new inventory and was not paying attention to the conversation at the counter. "Zara," Rick called out as he set down the box. "Did you remember to activate the quantum security scanner for today's high-value customers?" Zara shot him an annoyed look. "Of course I did, though I doubt we'll need it today." She glanced meaningfully at Keanu. Rick finally noticed the customer at the counter. He smiled politely at Keanu, then turned back to his work. The quantum scanner hummed quietly in the background, automatically recording the biometric data of everyone who entered the store. Keanu stood quietly for a moment, still looking at Zara. His face remained calm, but there was something in his posture that suggested deep thought. He had encountered prejudice before, of course. Even in the advanced society of 2387, some beings still judged others by their appearance or species. "Thank you for your time," Keanu said finally. His voice was soft, but it carried a weight that made both Zara and Rick look at him more closely. He turned toward the door, then paused. "The Infinity Weaver is beautiful," he said without looking back. "I hope it finds its way to someone who will appreciate not just its value, but its meaning." With that, he walked out of the store. The door chimed again as it closed behind him. Zara watched him go, a satisfied smirk on her blue face. "Another human tourist who thinks he can afford luxury goods," she muttered to Rick. "They never learn their place." Rick frowned. Something about the encounter bothered him, though he could not put his finger on what. The customer had seemed different, somehow. There had been something in his voice, in the way he carried himself. Outside the store, Keanu continued his walk through the luxury district. His expression remained calm, but his mind was active. He had seen the look in Zara's eyes many times before. It was the look of someone who judged others based on appearances, on assumptions, on prejudice. He thought about the beautiful watch in the window. The Infinity Weaver was indeed special. According to the technical specifications he had glimpsed on the display, it could show time across multiple dimensions. It was a masterpiece of both art and science. But what interested Keanu more was what had just happened in the store. The casual dismissal, the assumption that a human in simple clothes could not afford luxury goods. It was a small thing, perhaps, but small things often revealed larger truths about society. He made a mental note to look into the ownership structure of the luxury district. As Earth's cultural ambassador, he had access to extensive databases about galactic commerce. It might be interesting to see who really owned these expensive shops. For now, though, he simply continued his walk, enjoying the rare moment of peace in his busy life. The encounter at Temporal Elegance had given him much to think about, and Keanu Reeves had always been a man who turned thinking into action. 3 hours had passed since the strange human customer left Temporal Elegance. Zara Villix continued her work, organizing inventory and helping other customers. She had already forgotten about the man in simple clothes who could not afford the Infinity Weaver. Rick Thorne, however, could not stop thinking about the encounter. Something about the human bothered him. The way the man had spoken, the calm dignity in his voice, the look in his dark eyes. Rick had worked with humans for 5 years since taking this job on New Geneva Station. He had learned to read their expressions and body language. During his lunch break, Rick decided to check the quantum security logs. Every customer who entered the store was automatically scanned and their biometric data recorded. The system created a basic profile that included species, estimated age, and if the person was in any public databases, their identity. Rick sat at the small computer terminal in the back office. He pulled up the morning's security logs and scrolled through the entries. Most showed the usual mix of alien tourists and wealthy collectors. Then he found the entry from 3 hours ago. The timestamp matched exactly when the human had entered the store. Rick clicked on the file to open the detailed scan results. What he saw made his coffee cup slip from his fingers and crashed to the floor. "No way," he whispered, staring at the screen. The biometric scan had identified the customer. His name appeared in bold letters at the top of the file: Keanu Charles Reeves. Below that was a photograph that matched the man who had just been in their store. But this was not just any photograph. It was an official diplomatic portrait. Rick's hand shook as he scrolled through the information. Born in 1964. Current age: 423 years. Current position: Earth's cultural ambassador to the Galactic Council. Estimated personal wealth classified but believed to exceed 500 billion galactic credits. Oh no, Rick said aloud. His voice cracked with panic. He kept reading. The file listed Keanu's achievements over the past 4 centuries. In 2089, he had single-handedly prevented the first human-AI war by negotiating a peace treaty between artificial intelligences and biological humans. In 2156, he had solved the Martian independence crisis through diplomatic talks that lasted 3 months. In 2203, he had been chosen as humanity's first representative to the newly formed Galactic Council. But the information that made Rick's blood run cold was near the bottom of the file. Under financial holdings, it listed dozens of companies and investments. Rick recognized many of the names. They were major corporations that operated throughout human space. One name jumped out at him: New Geneva Development Corporation. Rick knew that company. They owned most of New Geneva Space Station, including the entire luxury district, including temporal elegance. Rick stared at the screen in horror. The man Zara had dismissed as a poor human tourist was not only one of the richest beings in the galaxy, he was also technically their boss, several times over. "Zara," Rick called out, his voice high with panic. The Zentorian woman appeared in the doorway of the back office. She looked annoyed at being interrupted. "What is it, Rick? I have customers to attend to." "The human who was here earlier," Rick said, pointing at the computer screen. "Do you know who that was?" Zara glanced at the screen, then shrugged. "Some tourist who thought he could afford luxury goods." "Why?" Rick turned the monitor so she could see it clearly. That was Keanu Reeves. Zara stared at the name for a moment. Her violet eyes grew wide as the recognition hit her. Every being in the galaxy knew that name. Keanu Reeves was not just famous among humans. He was a legend throughout known space. "That is impossible," Zara said. But her voice lacked conviction. She leaned closer to the screen, studying the photograph and biometric data. "It's him," Rick said. "The quantum scanner doesn't make mistakes. You just told Keanu Reeves that he couldn't afford a 50,000 credit watch." Zara's blue skin began to turn a pale green color. In Zentorian physiology, this was a sign of extreme stress or fear. She sank into the chair next to Rick, staring at the computer screen. "But he looked so ordinary," she whispered. "He was wearing simple clothes. He seemed like just another human." "That's the point," Rick said. "Don't you know anything about human culture? Keanu Reeves is famous for being humble. He's been wealthy for centuries, but he still dresses like a regular person. He still acts like he's just another guy." Rick pulled up more files on his computer. News articles about Keanu's diplomatic work, photos of him at important galactic events, always dressed simply despite being surrounded by beings in expensive clothes. Stories about his charitable work, how he had given away billions of credits to help build schools and hospitals on colony worlds. "Look at this," Rick said, pointing to one article. 2 years ago, he donated his entire salary as cultural ambassador to fund refugee camps for beings displaced by the Rigel system war. He does stuff like this all the time. Zara read the articles with growing horror. Each story revealed more about the man she had dismissed so casually. He was not just wealthy and powerful. He was beloved throughout the galaxy for his kindness and wisdom. "What have I done?" Zara moaned, holding her head in her hands. Rick kept digging through the files. "It gets worse," he said grimly. "According to this, he personally owns 12% of New Geneva Development Corporation. But look at this other company." He pointed to another entry in Keanu's financial holdings. "Stellar Luxury Holdings. They own the management contract for this entire district. Every store here pays them a percentage of their profits." Zara looked up from her hands. "Meaning what?" "Meaning he could shut us down with one phone call," Rick said. "He could terminate our lease, cancel our permits, or just recommend that other humans avoid shopping here. Half our customers are human diplomats and business people. If Keanu Reeves tells them not to shop at Temporal Elegance, we're finished." The 2 employees sat in silence for several minutes, absorbing the full impact of what had happened. Zara had not just insulted a wealthy customer. She had insulted one of the most important and respected beings in the galaxy. Someone who had the power to destroy their business without even trying hard. Maybe he won't do anything, Zara said hopefully. Maybe he will just forget about it. Rick shook his head. You don't understand humans very well, do you? Keanu Reeves doesn't need to do anything. Other people will do it for him. Once word gets out about what happened here, every human in the galaxy will hear about it. He pulled up the store's customer database. Look at our client list. 30% of our customers are human. Another 20% are aliens who do business with humans. If they think we're prejudiced against humans, they'll take their business elsewhere. Zara stared at the numbers, her green-tinged skin getting paler. How long do we have before word spreads? In the age of instant galactic communication, Rick said, maybe hours, maybe less. As if summoned by his words, Rick's personal communicator began to beep. He looked at the message and his face went white. What is it? Zara asked. Rick showed her the message. It was from his friend Tony Martinez, who worked in the station's administrative offices. The message was short, but terrifying. Did you guys really insult Keanu Reeves this morning? It's all over the station's internal communication network. Zara stood up from her chair so quickly that she nearly fell over. We have to do something. We have to fix this. Rick was already reaching for his communicator. I'm calling the store manager. Then I'm calling corporate headquarters. Maybe if we act fast, we can limit the damage. But even as they scrambled to begin damage control, both Rick and Zara knew it was probably too late. In a connected galaxy where news traveled at the speed of light, their small act of prejudice was about to become a very big problem. Outside the store, beings walked past the windows, going about their daily business. None of them knew that the simple encounter between a Zentorian shopkeeper and a human customer was about to change everything. The news spread through New Geneva Space Station like wildfire. Within 2 hours of Tony Martinez sending his message to Rick, the story had reached every department on the massive orbital facility. Station workers whispered about it in hallways. Security guards discussed it during their shifts. Even the maintenance crews working in the lower levels had heard the story. Captain Lisa Monroe sat in her office in the station's security center, reading the incident report on her computer screen. She was a tall woman with short blonde hair and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. As head of station security, she had worked with diplomatic personnel for over 15 years. She knew Keanu Reeves personally from his many visits to New Geneva. Lisa shook her head as she read the details. The report was simple but damaging. A Zentorian employee at Temporal Elegance had assumed that Earth's cultural ambassador could not afford an expensive watch. She had directed him to the budget section of the store like he was some kind of tourist with empty pockets. Her communicator buzzed. The caller ID showed Jake Sullivan, the station's chief administrator. Lisa answered immediately. Lisa, please tell me this story about Keanu isn't true. Jake's voice sounded stressed and tired. It's true, Lisa replied. I checked the security footage myself. The whole thing is on video. Jake groaned audibly through the communicator. Do you have any idea what this could do to us? Keanu Reeves brings more diplomatic business to this station than any other single person. If he decides to hold his meeting somewhere else. Lisa understood Jake's panic. New Geneva Station survived on diplomatic and commercial traffic. The station hosted trade negotiations, peace talks, and cultural exchanges between dozens of different species. Keanu's presence here brought prestige and attracted other important visitors. Has anyone spoken to him about it? Lisa asked. That's what I'm calling about, Jake said. I need you to find him. Apologize on behalf of the station. Do whatever it takes to make this right. Lisa frowned. Jake, you know Keanu better than that. He's not the type to demand apologies or make threats. He'll probably just let it go. That's exactly the problem, Jake replied. If he just lets it go, other people won't. Do you know how many humans work on this station? How many human businesses operate here? They're all going to hear about this. Some of them are already talking about boycotting the luxury district. Lisa pulled up the station's personnel files on her computer. Jake was right. Nearly 40% of the station's permanent residents were human. They worked in everything from engineering to food service to diplomatic support. If they decided to avoid the luxury district, many businesses would suffer. I'll find him. Lisa said. But I'm not going to grovel. Keanu would hate that. 2 levels down from the security center, Dr. Amy Foster was having a very different reaction to the news. Amy worked as a xenoanthropologist, studying how different species interacted with each other. She had been researching human-alien relations for her doctoral thesis when the story about Keanu reached her. Amy was a small woman with curly red hair and bright green eyes that lit up when she found something interesting. And this story was very interesting indeed. She sat in her laboratory, surrounded by books and computer screens, taking notes as fast as she could type. This incident was a perfect example of what she called species-based assumption bias. It was exactly the kind of thing she had been looking for to support her research. Fascinating, Amy muttered to herself as she worked. The Zentarian employee made assumptions based on visual cues that had no relationship to actual wealth or status. She pulled up files on Zentarian culture. Their society was highly stratified, with clear visual markers of wealth and status. Expensive clothes, elaborate hairstyles, and jewelry all indicated a person's place in their social hierarchy. It made perfect sense that a Zentarian would assume that someone in simple clothes was poor. But human culture was different. Many wealthy humans deliberately dressed simply. They valued modesty and authenticity over displays of wealth. Amy had dozens of examples in her research files of rich humans who looked like ordinary people. Her communicator chimed with an incoming message. It was from her research partner, Dr. Kevin Wright, who worked in the Cultural Exchange Program. Amy, are you hearing about this Keanu situation? This is huge for your research. Amy smiled and typed back. Already on it. This is going to be a whole chapter in my thesis. Meanwhile, in the station's central communications hub, the story was reaching far beyond New Geneva. News traveled fast in the connected galaxy of 2387. Subspace communication networks carried information between star systems in minutes. Commander Beth Hayes sat at her desk in the Human Defense Fleet Liaison Office, reading reports from her contacts throughout the galaxy. Beth was a career military officer with steel gray hair and the kind of steady presence that made people trust her immediately. The reports were troubling. The story about Keanu was spreading to other stations, other worlds. Human communities throughout the galaxy were hearing about the incident. Some were angry, others were disappointed. A few were calling for boycotts of Zentarian businesses. Beth understood the bigger picture better than most people. Humans had worked for centuries to build good relationships with alien species. They had earned respect through diplomacy, trade, and cultural exchange. But that respect was fragile. It could be damaged by misunderstandings like this one. She opened a secure communication channel to Earth's diplomatic headquarters. This was the kind of situation that could spiral out of control if it wasn't handled carefully. Back in the luxury district, the effects were already visible. Rick Thorne stood behind the counter at Temporal Elegance watching the foot traffic outside. The normally busy shopping area seemed quieter than usual. Several humans had walked past their store without even looking in the windows. Zara sat in the back office making phone calls. She had spent the last hour trying to reach corporate headquarters, the district management office, and anyone else who might help her fix the situation. So far, no one had called her back. Any luck? Rick asked when she emerged from the office. Zara shook her head, her blue skin still pale with stress. The district manager's office says they're reviewing the situation. Corporate headquarters put me on hold for 30 minutes, then disconnected the call. Rick looked out the window again. A group of human tourists had stopped in front of the jewelry store across the street. They were pointing at Temporal Elegance and talking animatedly among themselves. "We're in trouble," Rick said quietly. At that moment, the store's door chimed. Both Rick and Zara looked up hopefully, expecting a customer. Instead, they saw Tony Martinez, Rick's friend from the administrative offices. Tony was a short, stocky man with worried eyes. He hurried over to the counter, looking around nervously. "Rick, you need to know what's happening," Tony said in a low voice. "The story is everywhere. I've gotten calls from 3 different news services asking for comments. The Zentarian embassy is getting involved. And Jake Sullivan is running around like his hair is on fire. How bad is it? Rick asked. Tony pulled out his personal communicator and showed them a news feed. The headline read, Earth's ambassador faces discrimination on New Geneva Station. It's not just local news, Tony explained. This story is being picked up by galactic media networks. I've seen reports from the Altair system, the Centauri colonies, even from Earth itself. Zara sank into a chair behind the counter. This is a disaster. It gets worse, Tony continued. Some human groups are calling for boycotts, not just of your store, but of all Centaurian businesses. There's talk of protest at the Centaurian embassy. Rick felt sick to his stomach. What had started as a simple case of poor customer service was turning into an interspecies incident, the kind of thing that could damage relationships between entire civilizations. What can we do? Rick asked. Tony shrugged helplessly. I don't know. But whatever you're going to do, you better do it fast. This situation is getting bigger by the hour. As if to emphasize his point, Tony's communicator began buzzing with incoming messages. He glanced at the screen and his face went pale. What now? Zara asked. Tony looked up at them with wide eyes. The Galactic Council is calling an emergency session. They want to discuss recent incidents of species-based discrimination in human space. The three of them stood in silence, absorbing the implications. A simple moment of prejudice in a watch shop was about to become a matter of galactic politics. And somewhere on the station, Keanu Reeves continued his day, probably unaware of the chaos spreading in his wake. Keanu Reeves sat in his private office in the Earth Embassy wing of New Geneva Station. The room was simple and comfortable, with a large window showing the stars beyond. Books lined the walls, both physical and digital. A small wooden desk held his personal computer and a cup of tea that had gone cold hours ago. He had spent the morning reading reports about the growing controversy surrounding his visit to Temporal Elegance. His personal assistant had forwarded him dozens of messages from news organizations, government officials, and concerned citizens throughout the galaxy. The story was spreading faster than anyone had expected. Keanu sighed and rubbed his temples. This was exactly what he had hoped to avoid. He had lived for over 4 centuries, and he had learned that sometimes the smallest actions could have the biggest consequences. A moment of prejudice in a watch shop was now threatening to become an interspecies crisis. A soft knock on his door interrupted his thoughts. Come in, he called. Danny Carter entered the office. Danny was Earth's trade representative to the Galactic Council, an energetic man in his 50s with graying hair and kind eyes. He had worked with Keanu for over 10 years and understood both human nature and galactic politics. Keanu, we need to talk, Danny said, closing the door behind him. I assume this is about the watch shop incident, Keanu replied, gesturing for Danny to sit down. Danny nodded and took a seat across from Keanu's desk. It's getting out of hand. I've had calls from Earth, from the Centauri colonies, from human communities on dozens of worlds. People are angry. Some are calling for boycotts of Centaurian businesses. Others want to protest at their embassy. Keanu listened quietly, his dark eyes thoughtful. This was the part of his job he liked least. He had become a diplomat to build bridges between species, not to become the center of conflicts. What do you think I should do? Keanu asked. Danny leaned forward. Most people in your position would demand an apology. Maybe ask for the employee to be fired. Use this as an opportunity to make an example. But, Keanu prompted, hearing the hesitation in Danny's voice. But you're not most people, Danny continued. You have an opportunity here to do something bigger, something that could actually make a difference. Keanu smiled slightly. This was why he valued Danny's counsel. The man understood that sometimes the best response to a problem was not revenge, but solutions. I've been thinking the same thing, Keanu said. What if we use this incident to create something positive? Over the next hour, Keanu and Danny worked together to develop an idea. Instead of demanding punishment for the Centaurian employee, they would propose something much more ambitious. They would create a comprehensive program to address discrimination throughout human space. We could call it the Universal Dignity Protocol, Danny suggested as they worked on their notes. Keanu nodded. A program that provides education about different species and cultures, training for businesses that serve diverse customers, economic incentives for companies that promote inclusion, and oversight, Danny added. Some kind of review board, with representatives from all the major species. A way to address problems before they become incidents like this one. As they developed their proposal, Keanu felt the familiar excitement that came with finding solutions to difficult problems. This was what he had always loved about diplomatic work, taking conflicts and transforming them into opportunities for progress. How do we fund something like this? Danny asked. Keanu smiled. I'll cover the first year myself. After that, we can seek funding from the Galactic Council and member governments. Danny stared at him. Do you know how much a galaxy-wide program like this would cost? A lot less than the economic damage from widespread discrimination, Keanu replied. And much less than the cost of interspecies conflicts. They spent another hour refining their proposal. The Universal Dignity Protocol would have several components: educational programs for businesses and organizations, cultural sensitivity training for employees who worked with diverse populations, economic incentives for companies that demonstrated inclusive practices, and a review board that could investigate complaints and recommend solutions. This is ambitious, Danny said, as they finished their notes. It's going to take years to implement fully. All the best changes take time, Keanu replied, but we have to start somewhere. Danny gathered up his papers and stood to leave. I'll start reaching out to contacts at the Galactic Council. See? If we can get some preliminary support before you make this public. After Danny left, Keanu sat alone in his office looking out at the stars. He thought about the Zentorian woman at the watch shop, Zara Villix, according to the security report he had received. She had made assumptions about him based on his appearance, but those assumptions came from her cultural background. In Zentorian society, wealth and status were displayed openly. She had no way of knowing that humans often valued modesty over ostentation. The real problem was not individual prejudice but lack of understanding between species. In a galaxy where dozens of different civilizations interacted daily, misunderstandings were inevitable. The key was creating systems to address those misunderstandings before they caused harm. Keanu's communicator chimed with an incoming call. The caller ID showed Captain Lisa Monroe from Station Security. Hello, Lisa, Keanu answered. Keanu, I'm sorry to bother you. Lisa's voice sounded tired. I wanted to apologize on behalf of the station for what happened at that store. That's not necessary, Keanu replied gently. You weren't responsible for what happened. Still, I feel terrible about it. Is there anything we can do to make this right? Keanu smiled at Lisa's concern. This was exactly the kind of response he had expected from the humans on the station. They felt personally responsible for the actions of others, even when those actions were not their fault. Actually, there is something you can help with, Keanu said. I'm working on a proposal for a new program to address these kinds of incidents. I could use your expertise on security and law enforcement. Lisa sounded surprised. You want to create a program, not just demand an apology? Apologies don't prevent future problems, Keanu explained, but education and understanding might. They talked for another 20 minutes about Keanu's proposal. Lisa agreed to help develop the security and enforcement aspects of the Universal Dignity Protocol. She also offered to serve on the review board if it was established. After ending the call with Lisa, Keanu received 3 more similar calls. Dr. Amy Foster wanted to contribute her research on interspecies relations. Commander Beth Hayes offered the support of the Human Defense Fleet for educational programs. Even Jake Sullivan, the station administrator, called to volunteer his administrative expertise. By the end of the day, Keanu had received offers of support from over 30 people. Humans throughout the galaxy were reaching out, wanting to turn a negative incident into positive change. It was exactly the kind of response that made Keanu proud to represent humanity. As evening approached, Keanu prepared to make his proposal public. Tomorrow, He would announce the Universal Dignity Protocol to the galactic media. He would explain how a moment of prejudice in a watch shop had inspired a galaxy-wide effort to promote understanding and respect between species. He thought again about Zara Villix, the Zentaurian woman who had dismissed him so casually. She probably had no idea that her moment of poor judgment was about to become the catalyst for one of the largest anti-discrimination programs in galactic history. Keanu hoped she would see it not as punishment, but as an opportunity. An opportunity for her species, and for all the beings in the galaxy to learn from this mistake and build something better. Outside his window, the stars continued their ancient dance, indifferent to the small dramas of the beings who traveled between them. But those small dramas mattered. They were how civilizations grew, how understanding developed, and how progress was made, one interaction at a time. Ambassador Kel Varnus stood at the window of his office in the Zentaurian embassy on New Geneva Station. The tall, blue-skinned diplomat watched the busy corridors below, his violet eyes troubled. News of the incident at Temporal Elegance had reached him 3 hours ago, and he had been dealing with the fallout ever since. Kel was different from most of his species. While many Zentaurians were proud and looked down on other races, Kel had spent decades working in diplomatic service. He had learned to appreciate the strengths of different species and cultures. He understood that Zentaurian arrogance often caused problems in galactic relations. His personal communicator buzzed with another incoming call. This was the 15th call he had received about the incident. The caller ID showed Ambassador Thex Coriand from the Altarian embassy. Kel, have you heard about this situation with the human ambassador? Thex's voice carried concern and curiosity. I have heard, Kel replied. One of my people made a serious mistake. Thex was quiet for a moment. The Altarians were tall, green-skinned, beings known for their wisdom and careful thinking. They rarely spoke without considering their words carefully. What will you do? Thex finally asked. I am calling an emergency meeting with the other ambassadors, Kel said. This situation affects all of us, not just the Zentaurians. 2 hours later, the main conference room in the diplomatic quarter was filled with representatives from a dozen different species. The room itself was designed to accommodate various alien physiologies. Some ambassadors sat in traditional chairs, while others preferred standing platforms or specialized seating for their particular body types. Ambassador Thex Coriand sat at the curved table, his tall green form relaxed but alert. Next to him was Ambassador Vex Morlane of the Betelgeusian Trade Union, a short furry being with large black eyes that seemed to see everything. Across the table sat Ambassador Rin Yoshida from the Rigel Colonial Alliance, a human woman with gray hair and the steady manner of someone who had seen many diplomatic crises. Thank you all for coming on such short notice, Kel began as he stood at the head of the table. I assume you have all heard about the incident involving Ambassador Reeves. Several of the ambassadors nodded. The story had spread throughout the diplomatic community within hours. The question before us, Kel continued, is how to respond appropriately. This was not just an insult to one individual. It was an insult to Earth's highest representative, and by extension, to humanity itself. Ambassador Vex Morlane leaned forward, his small hands folded on the table. Have you spoken with the employee responsible? Not yet, Kel admitted. I wanted to understand the full scope of the situation first. Ambassador Rin Yoshida cleared her throat. As the human representative in the group, everyone turned to listen to her words carefully. I know Keanu personally, Rin said. He will not demand punishment or revenge, that is not his way. But the human community throughout the galaxy is very upset about this incident. What kind of response are they planning? Asked Ambassador. Thex.Rin shook her head. That is what concerns me. I have received reports of boycotts against Zentaurian businesses. Some human groups are talking about protests. There is even discussion of bringing this matter before the Galactic Council as a formal complaint. The room fell silent. A formal complaint to the Galactic Council could lead to sanctions, trade restrictions, or other diplomatic consequences. It was the kind of escalation that could damage relationships between species for years. Surely Ambassador Reeves would not support such extreme measures, said Ambassador Kell. You are right, Rin replied. Keanu would never support boycotts or protests, but he may not be able to control the reaction of other humans. When people feel that one of their most respected leaders has been insulted, they often react emotionally. Ambassador Vexmorland stroked his furry chin thoughtfully. This incident reveals a larger problem, he said. How many times do misunderstandings like this happen without involving someone famous? How many beings face discrimination simply because others do not understand their culture? The question hung in the air. Everyone in the room had probably witnessed or experienced some form of species-based prejudice. It was an unfortunate reality of galactic civilization. In my experience, said Ambassador Thex, humans have a unique way of dealing with problems, like this. They do not seek revenge. They seek solutions. Ambassador Rin nodded. Exactly. I received a preliminary briefing about Keanu's response to this incident. He is not planning to demand apologies or punishment. He is planning something much more ambitious. She paused, making sure she had everyone's attention. He is proposing a galaxy-wide program to address discrimination and promote understanding between species. The other ambassadors looked surprised. This was not the kind of response they had expected. What kind of program? Asked Kell. Rin consulted her notes. It would be called the Universal Dignity Protocol. Educational programs, cultural training, economic incentives for inclusive businesses, and oversight mechanisms to address complaints before they become major incidents. Ambassador Vexmorland's black eyes widened. That is comprehensive and expensive, added another ambassador. Keanu plans to fund the first year himself, Rin explained. After that, he hopes to get support from the Galactic Council and member governments. The room buzzed with quiet conversations as the ambassadors discussed this unexpected development. This was not how diplomatic incidents usually unfolded. Typically, the offended party would demand concessions or reparations. They would use the incident to gain political advantage or extract favorable treatment. But humans seem to operate by different rules. Instead of seeking personal benefit from the situation, they were proposing to spend their own resources to solve a problem that affected everyone. This is why humans have become such effective mediators, observed Ambassador Thex. They approach conflicts differently than most species. Commander Beth Hayes entered the conference room at that moment. She had been invited to provide the military perspective on the situation. Beth was a stocky woman with steel-gray hair and the kind of steady presence that inspired confidence. Ambassadors, Beth said as she took her seat. I wanted to brief you on the security implications of this incident. She activated a holographic display that showed communication traffic throughout the galaxy. As you can see, news of this incident has spread to every major human population center. We are monitoring for potential civil unrest or organized protests. The display showed message traffic increasing dramatically over the past several hours. But the pattern was unusual. What we are seeing, Beth continued, is not anger or calls for revenge. Instead, we are seeing offers of support for Ambassador Reeves's proposed solution. Human communities throughout the galaxy are volunteering to participate in the Universal Dignity Protocol. She highlighted several data points on the display. The Luna City Chamber of Commerce has offered to pilot the business training program. The Centauri colonial government wants to host cultural exchange programs. Even individual humans are donating money to support the initiative. Ambassador Kell stared at the display in amazement. They are turning an insult into an opportunity for improvement. That is exactly what they are doing, Beth confirmed. This is how humans typically respond to challenges. They do not dwell on the problem. They focus on creating solutions. The ambassadors spent another hour discussing the implications of Keanu's proposal. By the end of the meeting, several of them had volunteered to support the Universal Dignity Protocol with their own governments. I will speak personally with the employee who caused this incident, Ambassador Kell announced, not to punish her, but to help her understand what she can learn from this experience. As the meeting ended and the ambassadors prepared to leave, Ambassador Thex approached Kel privately. Your species could learn much from how the humans are handling this situation, Thex said quietly. Kel nodded. We could all learn from it. That may be the most important outcome of this entire incident. Outside the conference room, the normal business of the diplomatic quarter continued, but something had changed. A simple moment of prejudice in a watch shop had revealed something profound about human nature and their approach to solving problems. The aliens were beginning to understand why humans had become such trusted mediators in galactic affairs. It was not because they were the strongest or the smartest species. It was because they had the remarkable ability to transform negative experiences into positive change and to respond to hatred with understanding. 3 months had passed since the incident at Temporal Elegance. New Geneva Space Station had returned to its normal rhythm of diplomatic meetings, trade negotiations, and cultural exchanges. But beneath the surface, many things had changed. The Universal Dignity Protocol had been officially launched 2 weeks ago, with support from 47 star systems. The program was already showing results. Businesses throughout human space were participating in cultural sensitivity training. Universities were offering courses on interspecies communication. Even the Galactic Council had voted to adopt similar programs in non-human territories. Temporal Elegance itself had become something of a symbol. The store was now the first business to receive full certification under the new protocol. A small plaque by the front door announced this achievement in 12 different languages. Zara Villick stood behind the counter, arranging a new display of timepieces. She looked different than she had 3 months ago. Her expensive robes had been replaced by a simple but elegant uniform. Her elaborate hairstyle was now pulled back in a practical style that allowed her to work more comfortably. But the biggest change was in her eyes. Where once there had been arrogance and disdain, now there was understanding and genuine warmth. The past 3 months had been the most educational of her life. After the incident, Zara had expected to be fired. Instead, she had been enrolled in an intensive program about human culture and history. She had learned about Earth's diverse societies, their values of equality and humility, and their long struggle against discrimination within their own species. She had studied the life of Keanu Reeves in particular. She learned about his childhood, his early career as an actor, his transition into diplomacy, and his centuries of work building bridges between different worlds. She discovered that his simple clothing and modest manner were not signs of poverty, but expressions of deeply held beliefs about the importance of treating all beings with equal respect. The education program had been difficult at first. Zara had to confront her own prejudices and assumptions. She had to acknowledge that Zentorian culture's emphasis on visible displays of wealth and status had blinded her to other ways of measuring worth and value. But as she learned more about different species and cultures, Zara found herself becoming genuinely interested in the diversity of galactic civilization. She began to see customers not as representatives of inferior or superior species, but as individuals with their own unique stories and perspectives. Rick Thorne emerged from the back office carrying a box of inventory. He smiled at Zara as he set the box down. Their working relationship had grown much stronger over the past 3 months. Rick had helped Zara through the difficult early days of her cultural education, patiently answering questions and sharing his own experiences working with diverse customers. Any word on when the documentary crew arrives? Rick asked. Zara checked her schedule. They should be here in about an hour. The producer wants to film the store as an example of successful protocol implementation. The documentary was being produced by Galactic Broadcasting Network, the largest media organization in known space. It would tell the story of how a simple incident of discrimination had sparked a galaxy-wide movement for understanding and respect. Are you nervous about being interviewed? Rick asked. Zara considered the question. 3 months ago, she would have been terrified at the thought of galactic media attention. Now she felt ready to share what she had learned. No, she said. I think it is important for people to hear about what happened and what we learned from it. The store's door chimed, and both Rick and Zara looked up to see a familiar figure enter. Keanu Reeves walked through the door, moving with the same calm presence he had shown 3 months ago. He was dressed, as always, in simple clothes, dark jeans, a gray shirt, and comfortable shoes. Zara felt her heart beat faster, but not from fear. She was genuinely excited to see him again. Over the past 3 months, she had wanted to thank him for the way he had handled the situation. Instead of seeking punishment or revenge, he had created an opportunity for her to grow and learn. "Good morning," Keanu said with his gentle smile. "I hope I am not interrupting your work." "Not at all," Zara replied, stepping forward. "Ambassador Reeves, I have been hoping to see you again. I wanted to thank you." Keanu looked surprised. "Thank me? For what?" "For giving me a chance to learn," Zara said. "For creating something positive from my mistake. For showing me that there was a better way to understand other beings." Keanu nodded slowly. "The credit belongs to you. You were willing to learn and change. That takes courage." Rick stepped forward. "Ambassador, the store has changed a lot since you were here last. Would you like to see what we have done?" For the next 20 minutes, Rick and Zara gave Keanu a tour of the renovated store. They had added informational displays about different species and their cultural approaches to time and timekeeping. Customers could learn about Altarian seasonal calendars, Betelgeusian work cycles, and dozens of other fascinating variations on how different beings measured and valued time. "This is remarkable," Keanu said as they finished the tour. "You have turned a luxury goods store into a cultural education center. We discovered that when people understand each other better, they enjoy shopping more," Zara explained. "Our sales have actually increased since we implemented these changes." Keanu smiled at this news. It was exactly the kind of positive outcome he had hoped for when he proposed the Universal Dignity Protocol. "I assume you are here about the Infinity Weaver," Rick said. "The watch you were interested in 3 months ago?" Keanu looked toward the display window where the beautiful timepiece still sat in its place of honor. The Infinity Weaver continued to shift and change, showing glimpses of different dimensions of time. "Actually," Keanu said, "I was hoping to purchase something else." He walked over to a different display case, one that held much simpler timepieces. These were basic chronometers, functional and reliable, but without the elaborate features of the luxury models. "I would like to buy this one," Keanu said, pointing to a plain silver watch with a simple face and basic time display. Zara and Rick looked surprised. "Sir, that watch costs only 50 galactic credits. You could afford any timepiece in the store." Keanu picked up the simple watch and examined it carefully. "This one shows the time clearly and accurately. It will serve my needs perfectly." He looked up at Zara with his warm smile. "Time is not about luxury or status. Time is about what we do with the moments we are given. This watch will remind me of that every day." Zara carefully processed the sale, treating the 50-credit transaction with the same attention she would give to a purchase worth thousands. As she handed Keanu the wrapped timepiece, she said, "Thank you for teaching me that the value of a customer has nothing to do with how much they spend." Keanu accepted the package with a slight bow. "And thank you for showing that people can learn and grow from their mistakes. That gives me hope for the future of galactic civilization." As Keanu prepared to leave, the documentary crew arrived. The producer, an enthusiastic human woman named Carol Peterson, immediately recognized the ambassador. "Mr. Reeves, perfect timing. Would you be willing to say a few words for our documentary about the Universal Dignity Protocol?" Keanu agreed, and the crew quickly set up their equipment. As the cameras rolled, Carol asked him about the significance of what had happened at Temporal Elegance. "This incident taught us that discrimination often comes from ignorance, not malice," Keanu said. "When we respond to ignorance with education, to prejudice with patience, and to hatred with understanding, we create opportunities for positive change." He gestured toward Zara and Rick. "These two individuals have shown that people can learn, grow, and become better versions of themselves. That is the most hopeful message we can share with the galaxy." After the interview, Keanu left the store for the second time, but this time he left behind a very different atmosphere. Where once there had been tension and regret, now there was pride and accomplishment. 6 months later, the documentary, Time for Change, The Temporal Elegance Story, would win the Galactic Broadcasting Award for Best Cultural Programming. On the key, Universal Dignity Protocol would be adopted by over 200 star systems, and Zara Vilix would become one of the program's most effective ambassadors, traveling throughout Centaurian space to teach other businesses about the importance of cultural sensitivity. But perhaps the most important outcome was simpler and more personal. Every day, millions of beings throughout the galaxy were treating each other with a little more understanding, a little more respect, and a little more dignity, all because one man had chosen to respond to prejudice with wisdom, and 2 employees had chosen to learn from their mistakes. In his office that evening, Keanu looked at his new watch. It showed the time simply and clearly, just as he had wanted. But more than that, it reminded him of a fundamental truth about time itself. Every moment was an opportunity to choose understanding over anger, education over punishment, and hope over despair. Time, he reflected, was indeed the most precious thing in the universe, and the best way to spend it was building bridges between the beings who shared the stars.